I'm 6 foot tall, I'm a foreigner, my legs are covered in tattoos, and I'm not thin. So there's a lot of reasons for people to be staring at me, and I don't really care why they are, they just do, and like I said, I don't notice it anymore.
Welcome to another season of I Taught English Abroad, where we cover a range of topics from the world of TEFL. This podcast has it all, from passport stamps to recruitment, tips for teachers who want to be internet sensations, finding accommodation in far-flung locales, and so much more. Subscribe now so you don't miss any new episodes. There's a lot to be said for not taking the obvious choice. In the context of moving abroad and teaching English, you could say that means going to a big city with loads of jobs, other people who speak your language, endless facilities, and, in general, perhaps a kinder atmosphere for the first-time visitor. Our next guest, Ilsa Strough, didn't do that. As you'll hear, Ilsa has a penchant for doing things the way that she wants to, proudly and with caution to the wind. Based in Korea, and with a major social media following and an inspiring story to tell, here's Ilsa. Welcome back to I Taught English Abroad. I'm here with Ilsa Strough, and first of all, what I wanted to ask you was, as someone who is teaching abroad, were you always interested in language, and where did that kind of desire to teach come from?
I would not say I have always been interested in language. Being from the US, I remember having to take or pick a language in high school, and I took Spanish because I thought it would be the easiest and the most useful. And that was the extent of my language learning experience. But I got degrees in anthropology and religious studies in university, and that's what really inspired me and pushed me to start traveling. And I decided to start teaching just because I knew I wanted a job that allowed me to travel. And I knew teaching abroad or teaching online would give me that opportunity to leave the US and experience new cultures and new religions and people, which are all things I've always been super fascinated and interested in, especially because of my university degrees now. So teaching abroad definitely was not planned for me, but it's where I ended up.
Excellent. So, in terms of where you grew up in Wisconsin, it sounds as though you always had a desire to leave and see the world. Or did you kind of ever see yourself living and working in Wisconsin permanently? I mean, it sounds like it was always the kind of plan for you to get out and see things.
Yeah, so I originally grew up in Illinois in a really small town, in a town of about 1,000 people, so very small. We did not have any stoplights,
Wow.
so that tells you how small it was. Uh, and I knew I wanted to see more and do more. I knew there was more from my little farming town that I was from. And then I went to Wisconsin in high school. Went to university in Wisconsin, and that's when I started just doing a little couple weekend trips here and there. But I definitely, after studying what I studied in university and learning about all these different cultures and people, I just had that desire to get out and see more. It was in university when I did my first international trip. I went to Italy and Greece for my first international trip. And then the next year I went to Peru. And then the next year I went to Ireland. And so it really got that ball rolling of seeing more and trying to see as much as I possibly could because I just fell in love with the aspect of travel. And I knew I did not want to stay in the Midwest in the US.
Actually, that's really interesting, and the fact that you got all those amazing trips during university is like, I mean, that's credit to the university you're studying at, because that's incredible. But did that interest in South Korea, did that come from studying religion? Because whenever we speak to people who have moved to South Korea, they talk about how beautiful the temples are, about the sort of kind of reverence for even going back to ancient cultures, that kind of thing. Did those kind of interests intertwine, or was it always an interest in South Korea?
So when I was looking at moving abroad and teaching abroad, it was in 2021, mid-pandemic. So my only options, the countries that were letting people in and giving teacher visas, were China or South Korea. And I always joke that I kind of flipped a coin because I applied to jobs in both and I just kind of went with what I thought was the best offer. But the more I learned about South Korea, the more I was interested in it. I'm a big hiker, and the mountains and all the national parks in South Korea were such a huge draw. Then again, the religion, like you said, the religion aspect of there's so many hundreds of beautiful temples, so unique. And so that was another big draw as well. So it definitely was not on my list when I first started looking into it, but I always say the universe made the decision for me of it was between two countries, and I like to think I ended up at the right one for these last couple of years.
Well, I mean, it's great, and judging from social media, that kind of thing, it's clear that you feel very much at home. But let's say in a world where there was no pandemic, what other places did you have in mind when it came sort of time to move and start teaching?
I ideally always wanted to go back to Peru, to go back to South America. I fell in love with Peru. I 100% could see myself teaching there in the future, but I just knew it was really hard to do that back then when I was looking at moving abroad, but also just the market for teaching. It's a very break even market where you kind of just get paid just enough to pay your bills and it's hard to save. And I knew coming to South Korea, they pay for your like flight here. They will cover your apartment, and you get paid a decent salary where you can kind of save without trying. And I have student loans back in the U.S., so that was a big push as well of knowing that I would love to teach in South America or in Europe. I've looked into like Spain or the Czech Republic, but also being realistic of right now I needed someplace that would help me pay off my student loan debt, and South Korea again was my only option at the time, or one of my two options at the time, and so it worked out in my favor. But I've always said in the future I would love to end up in like Central or South America teaching because I loved my time in Peru, and I've always wanted to go back to explore more.
That's absolutely fair. And in terms of the process of becoming qualified, because obviously, with 2 degrees, clearly you have an interest in academics, but what was your process in terms of becoming TEFL qualified? And what was your first lesson like? Did you go straight into in person teaching or did you do some online teaching first? Like, what was your path essentially?
Yeah, so I got TEFL certified. I remember thinking about it in early 2021, and then I signed up, did my course, and then after I did my course, I actually volunteered with a couple literacy centers in Wisconsin, which was hard to find in the middle of the pandemic when most of them are nonprofits and a lot of them were closed. So I was able to find a few who were doing classes over Zoom, though, and so I one of them was the literacy center working with a local university, working with exchange students or just students who are maybe first generation here, and so or in like the U.S. And then I also worked for another literacy center that was working with mothers, refugee mothers, and just teaching them the language and important vocabulary of what they need to know to live in the United States. So, like the school terminology, or when they take their kids to the doctor, like that kind of terminology. And so I did that for about 2 months after I got my TEFL certification. And I always say it wasn't perfect because it was done over Zoom and it's very different being over Zoom versus being in the classroom. But I definitely do think it helped me in the long run, just being able to see how other teachers teach. They were so kind and gracious to let me teach a couple classes, even though I was just a volunteer sitting in on them. They were super helpful in giving me advice and tips, and I still stay in contact with them today. So I did that because I just wanted to get a little under my belt of being in a classroom or at least over Zoom. And then I moved abroad and started teaching in South Korea. And when you come here, I don't know about most schools, but my school, we only had about a week of training. So I had a week of observing, or not even a week, I had like 3 days of observing other teachers, and then I was thrown in the deep end, as I call it, for 2 days where I was being observed and teaching classes. And I know it was rough. I know I messed up and made a lot of mistakes, but I also say that being thrown in the deep end like that definitely made me a better teacher because I did have to learn quickly, and it made me want to ask a lot of questions to make sure that I was doing everything correct.
There's a couple of things that jump out from that there, but I guess that the first most pressing thing is I just kind of wanted to know what your emotions were like, kind of, as you say, being in the deep end there. Like, did you sort of, was there a moment of shock when you thought to yourself, oh my goodness, I am not only teaching, I am teaching in a foreign country. And like, for all the planning you can put into it and all the kind of years of like, of aspiration, actually doing it is a bit different. So, what were kind of your emotions at that time?
I was so stressed. I remember I cried after my first day because
Oh
it was
no.
so overwhelming. It just like I said, being thrown in the deep end. And even though looking back, I'm so grateful that it happened that way and that I know I learned fast. But it just, at the time, it was so overwhelming, especially not having any true teaching experience. And I don't want to scare anyone by saying this, that like sometimes you are thrown in the deep end, but you always find your way, right? Like it's just like swimming. That's why it's called thrown in the deep end, right? You'll eventually get it. But yeah, I was very overwhelmed for about my first week, but then I started like getting used to the kids, the students started getting used to me, I was getting used to the curriculum, and like I said, like the best thing I did was just ask a lot of questions, and I know I asked the same questions over 10 times, and I was just constantly checking in with my coworkers saying, "Hey, is this correct?" And I think that was the best thing that I did, was just that constant asking questions, to make sure that I was on the right track, and I was. And yeah, it was overwhelming though. And I, whenever we have new teachers coming in at our school, or when people ask me about teaching here, I'll say it's overwhelming because it's a lot. Like moving abroad, being in a foreign country, starting a career. If this is your first time teaching, it's a lot, and I'm not like ashamed to say that I did cry on my first day. But there was never a time where I was like, I knew I want to leave or this isn't for me. I knew I was going to get my footing. I knew I'd get more comfortable with it. It's a lot at first. And I think with any job, whether you move abroad or whether you are in your home country, just starting a new job, a new career, whatever it may be, it's going to be overwhelming, but you'll eventually find your way. You'll find your footing.
Absolutely, and we'll get more into your kind of teaching experience in South Korea. Obviously, we'll cover a lot of that. There's just one thing I just wanted to pick up on, though. You talked about volunteering, a lot of it over Zoom, obviously. But how easy was it, would you say, to find opportunities locally? Because there'll be a lot of people who either want to sort of kind of test themselves in a sort of teaching or quasi teaching environment in a sort of kind of more local space. And there'll be people who also really want to volunteer long term. How easy was it to find opportunities, and how substantial a difference do these kind of non-profits make in communities like yours?
I would say my experience is probably different because it was mid-pandemic, a lot of places were not open. I did send a lot of emails to be met with, "We would love for you to volunteer when we open again." But I was lucky to find some who like, doing stuff over Zoom, and one of the literacy centers I worked with actually gave out, like, iPads to their students so they could do stuff over Zoom. Yeah, so I think that's amazing to accommodate everyone. But yeah, I definitely sent out a lot of emails, and I was very happy that not only one, but two got back to me, which is why I did both. Maybe I didn't need to do both, but I was gonna do them because they both reached out to me. Um, but yeah, I would say being in Wisconsin at the time, I was in like a smaller area in Wisconsin, so it would be hard. I think with anything, being in a bigger city, there's more options. But I think also with the rise of technology today, that I think we are seeing a lot of literacy center nonprofits doing stuff online, whether it's a class once a week, every day, whatever it may be. So I just Googled like literacy centers near me, and like a list popped up, and I kind of just went down the list and sent out emails to each of them and waited to hear back.
Feeling inspired? Fancy trying something completely new? Well, make your best move yet by signing up for a TEFL course with the most highly accredited provider on the planet. Here at the TEFL org, we offer a range of online and classroom courses that you can study at your own pace. All of our courses include top-of-the-range teaching materials and come with dedicated tutor support from experienced and highly qualified TEFL experts. And what's more, we'll give you money off to do it. Just enter the code PODCAST at checkout to get 50% off any of our internationally recognised TEFL courses. And that includes our best-selling 120-hour Premier Online course. With that code, you'll not only get 50% off, but you'll also get a free lesson plans pack. Within a matter of months, you could be a qualified TEFL teacher, out there exploring the world, or working to your own schedule from home as an online English teacher. Just use the code PODCAST at checkout to get started.
And we're back with Ilsa Strough. Now, you ended up working in Jeonju, which might not be the typical first port of call for those wishing to teach in South Korea. Now, did you apply through EPIC to work in South Korea, and were you placed there, or was it somewhere that you specifically chose?
I did not go through Epic. I looked at Epic for maybe like 1 minute, and I did not like the idea of not having a say in my location. So I exited out of that tab real quickly. So I am working at a Hagwon, or a private school here in Korea. And I chose Jeonju actually. I remember working all the recruiters I worked with. I told them I do not want to be in Seoul. I do not want to be in Busan. I want to be in a city like Jeonju or similar size to Jeonju. And I looked at a couple different schools, but I was very set on Jeonju because I was lucky enough to connect with someone online who taught in Jeonju, and she told me about her experience here, how there's an amazing foreigner community here, and I just really wanted to be in a city that was not going to be super overwhelming. Seoul is massive.
Yeah,
There's so much to see and do. There's always something happening. Coming from small town Illinois, small town Wisconsin, that was not going to be for me. I already knew it. I love visiting Seoul now, but I know I cannot live there. And same with Busan. It's an amazing city. I love visiting, but I don't think I could live there. It's just there's too much happening,
sure.
and I wanted to be in a city that had easy transportation to get to other places, that had good public transportation, that had a lot to do, some good restaurants, and that was it. I didn't need much to be happy. And I found all of that in Jeonju. It's the perfect size for me. It's really easy. It's in the center of the country, so it's super easy to get around. And so yeah, I very specifically said Jeonju or a city similar to Jeonju because I feel like a lot of people come to Korea wanting to be in Seoul, and I remember recruiters emailing back being like, are you sure you don't want to be in Seoul? Like, everyone wants to be in Seoul. And I'm like, I will be an easy person for you to place. I do not want to be in a big city.
That's absolutely fair. And Jeonju is it's a really really unique place because it is technically a city as you said there, but it's also quite rural and kind of reading up about it before this recording, it sounds extremely kind of idiosyncratic. So to those who don't know, including myself, who I may have read some things, but it doesn't make me an expert by any means. Can you go into a bit more detail about what it's like as a place because it's not really like anywhere else.
Yeah, I always say that it has kind of like a small town feel that even though it's not a small town, it's still a good sized city. There's a lot happening here. But it doesn't seem overwhelming. We have our main areas where there's food, where there's shopping, where there's like the bars for nightlife. Um, and it's the perfect size. And yeah, I think uh living here, it's not overwhelming. It's been easy to get around. I always say that I can take a 40-minute bus anywhere in the city, and I like that, that it's easy to get around, even though I go to like the main areas. We have a big like tourist area, which I think people coming to Jeonju, they might only know us for that. We have a big Hanok village, which is famous. So a lot of people will do day trips here from Seoul, but there's so much more to the city. There's a lot of nature. It's easy to get out of the city and go into the mountains. We're near a really famous mountain that people like to hike. So there's a lot to do. I think it's easy to get that city feel, but also to escape the busy areas, and then you feel like you're in a small town, basically.
And talking of small towns and reflecting on kind of your own upbringing, did you experience any sort of real kind of culture shock? I mean, beyond obviously the different language, different culture, that kind of thing. In terms of getting around, it doesn't. It sounds like you adjusted to it pretty quickly.
Yeah, I would honestly say the biggest culture shock, which also might be like the one I got over the quickest, is staring. um, I knew Koreans would stare because I'm a foreigner here and I'm not in a big city. I'm not in Seoul. I'm not in Busan. They're probably not used to seeing a lot of foreigners in Jeonju. Um, but it was something that had never really crossed my mind about staring. But within like 2 months of living here, I say I got used to it. I don't notice it anymore. Um, and so I think that would be the big thing for me was like the blatant staring at you or the kids who will stare and point just because they're seeing a foreigner. And I always joke whenever I like walk past a family where they have like a really young kid that looks like it's only a couple months old. I always joke like, does this kid look terrified because I'm the first foreigner they're seeing? Especially in Jeonju, where we have a pretty big foreigner community here for being the size we are. We have a couple universities here, and there's a couple big schools here that people teach us. So we have a good foreigner community here, but it's not like the big cities where you will run into foreigners a lot or you
No.
will hear English a lot. I think learning the language was something really important to me coming here, learning how to read Korean, the basic survival phrases that I call them, of what I need to know to go grocery shopping, to go out to eat, to go to a cafe, and the basic like transportation travel phrases that I really was having to learn pretty quickly because I'm not in a city, in a big city where maybe people are going to speak more English. That I needed to learn these phrases. I needed to study Korean early on so I could live comfortably here. And when I moved to Korea, I actually had a quarantine. So I used my 10-day quarantine to learn how to read the alphabet and I
Right.
studied Korean.
I mean, I can't think of a better use of time than that, really. But you mentioned earlier on, you talked about recruiters and recruiters wanting you to move to Seoul, essentially. How easy was it to find work in Jeonju? And also, like, what was that kind of recruitment process like overall? Did you get in touch with recruiters who tried to place you, or how did that all work? For especially for people who are hearing this and they kind of wonder how they might find work in the same way.
Yeah, so I found all of my recruiters off of the same online forum. I think it's very popular for jobs in Korea, and I think they have some jobs in China as well, and maybe some other places in Asia. But it's called Dave's ESL Cafe, and I think that's how most people I know who don't go through Epic or don't find a recruiter in another way usually will find their recruiter or their job on that website. And so I just remember spending 2 days scrolling on the website, sending out my headshot and my resume and the month I wanted to be in Korea to like 10, 15 recruiters. And then I heard back from about 5 or 6 of them. And I was always told in the process to work with as many recruiters as you can, because that means then you'll get sent more job opportunities and you'll be able to do more interviews. So I worked with all of them. And I told all of them the same thing, that I wanted to be in Jeonju, or a city like Jeonju, not Seoul, not Busan. All of them told me the same thing of, "Oh, are you sure you don't want to be in a big city?" um, yeah, so I found all my recruiters on there, and it was a pretty fast process of getting a recruiter, working with them, having them send over jobs, doing interviews within a week of them sending me a job, and then the school would contact the recruiter saying, "Oh, like we want to see like if she'll sign, send her a contract." So it was very fairly quick, as I would say. Like I think within a month of me doing being in the job hunt, looking and applying, I found my job. So about a month of me actually looking, I was able to sign a contract and start the visa process to move here.
Great, and we will talk a bit more about South Korea later on as well. But I just wanted to ask you because you're coming up to, if I'm right, you're coming up to about 2 years of living and working in South Korea. I just not to get too philosophical, but in those 2 years, what have you learned about teaching? Firstly, and what have you learned about yourself in that time? Has it been a real, kind of learning experience for you?
Yeah, I've learned so much about teaching. I have learned all the basics of teaching. I not really having proper teaching experience before coming. I feel like just little things of learning how to handle a classroom management, dealing with students who might not always be the best. Working in a hagwon, I don't have many big classes. I think the biggest class I've had has only been 12 students.
Right.
So,
Wow. Okay.
and I've had classes with only 2 students in them. So,
That's crazy.
yeah, so um, yeah, 2 students. And so yeah, isn't it? I was not expecting it, and then it's always funny when one of the students doesn't show up, and then I have a class with 1 student. Um, but yeah, I feel like I've learned so much about teaching, but outside of just classroom management, connecting with my students, it's always so funny that my students hear that I'm from the US and assume I'm rich. And I remember within my first month, my students were trying to guess what kind of car I drove in the US. And they were asking, did I drive a Tesla, a Lamborghini, a BMW? And I could not help but laugh because I drove a beat up car in the US. And I'm like, none of these were my car. Because they just think that everyone from the US has money. But it's those moments of connecting with students that I've really cherished while living and teaching here. And then also just learning more about teaching, like TOEFL. I teach a lot of middle school students who are preparing to do their TOEFL test. And so yeah, it's been a huge learning curve for me, but I've had an amazing experience, and I've loved connecting with my students. It's always sad when students will leave, but it's inevitable being in a like academy where they come to us after their private school or after their public schools, and so some of them will stay for years, some of them only come for 6 months, and then we never see them again. But in regards to kind of like what I've learned about myself, I think, and I could say this about a lot of things, but just how like capable I am of that. Who would have thought that I would be teaching in a foreign country, moving here, not knowing much about it, having no teaching experience, teaching all of these classes. I always joke because I had so many friends back in university who were education majors, and so many of them are not teaching, and I'm the one who ended up teaching. And so, yeah, I think things I've learned about myself, just like how capable I am, that I can do anything I put my mind to, that I moved all the way here. It was a big risk. I think it is a big risk when you move abroad, even if you have experience, but there are a lot of horror stories out there, people having very negative experiences teaching abroad in every country. And so it's definitely a risk moving, but it's definitely one of the greatest risks I've taken. And I think the reward has been amazing to be able to live in this country that I've cared for so much and have students that I really do enjoy teaching. I enjoy the teaching style that I do at my school, the curriculum I teach. So it's been overall a very positive experience. And I'm so grateful that I took that leap, even though it was scary. And I remember right before my 15-hour flight here, I was terrified and thinking, what am I doing? Why am I going to South Korea? It was a great chance that I just took a leap on. Yeah.
God, a 15-hour flight. That sounds. You know what? We're going to leave listeners a little break to dwell on that, and but I'll be right back with Ilsa.
Are you looking for a weekly guide to what's going on in the TEFL world? Do you want some advice on everything from job interviews to underrated TEFL destinations? Well, the TEFL Org blog has it all. Every single week, we tackle some of the biggest questions in the TEFL industry. Stay up to date with the latest trends in English teaching, find tips to make your next job application your best yet, or get inspired and read about the experiences of TEFL Org graduates teaching all around the world. Whether you're brand new to the industry, or you've seen it all, we can guarantee an interesting read each week. To find out more, go to tefl.org/blog. That's tefl.org/blog.
And we're back with Ilsa. Now, one of the key things about you, I would say, is that you've built a really significant following on social media. And if you're not following Ilsa on Instagram, then you're missing out. But you've got just under 10,000 followers now. I was wondering about that. What do you enjoy most about sharing your experiences online of teaching and of living in a different country? What are the major perks for you, do you think?
I love the community, community that I've built, of being able to reach new people, being able to help people plan trips. I have someone who I just met through Instagram not too long ago come to South Korea, and being able to give her my recommendations of these are the best things to see, the best things to do, has been really amazing. I'm so grateful for the community. I think it's a great platform to kind of build that community and to connect with other travelers, whether they are teachers, people teaching online, if they're doing freelance work, whatever it may be. It's an amazing way to connect with others who also love to travel and love to spend time outdoors. And I would also say, I love sharing my recommendations because I don't live in Seoul and I don't live in Busan, where I think you see so many creators online who live in these big cities, which are amazing, and I will always watch their vlogs. But I think it's an interesting point that I can make of not living in one of these big cities, of my little rural road trips that I'll do with friends, or spending time in the countryside around Jeonju or maybe in another city. I like being able to show people the hidden gems of Korea, because I think a lot of people, when they vacation here, they mainly go to Seoul or Busan and sometimes Jeju Island, which is off the coast of southern Korea. But besides that, people don't really travel much else of the country, and there is so much to see. Of my top 5 favorite cities in Korea, Seoul is not on that list, Busan is not on that
Oh,
list.
wow.
So there's so many amazing cities, and I love being able to just share the beauty and the history behind Korea and the temples here. There is just so much to see. There's so much packed into this country. So I just really enjoy sharing it because I love seeing it, and I hope my excitement comes across in what I share, because I'm always so excited when I go somewhere new, being able to share that with everyone.
Oh, definitely. I think that's one of the reasons it's so kind of popular and appealing to people is that that excitement is palpable. Really, it comes across very clearly, I think. And so, to other teachers who want to live and work abroad, and they also want to build a social media following while doing that, what advice would you give to them?
Be prepared for some long nights. I always joke that
All right. Okay.
my social media is like a full-time job on top of my full-time job, but it does not pay me yet. Because I do it for fun. I do it because I enjoy it. And I think that's what's most important, that if you do not wholeheartedly enjoy putting content out there and enjoy creating it and enjoy the community you have, you're not going to stick to it, because it's going to begin to feel like a chore, especially in teaching when you're spending all day working with kids. You have to be high energy. It can be a lot, and it is very busy. I always say, I travel on my weekends, and then on my weeks, on Monday through Friday, I'll wake up, I'll be editing stuff, I'll go to work, and then I'll go home and I'll edit some more stuff. So it's kind of nonstop, but I love doing it, which is why I do it. But it's not for everyone, and I think that's okay. But it can be a lot, but depending on the capacity of you wanting to share your experience here, I think it's possible for anyone to do it. And I think everyone loves to see different perspectives of people living abroad, and especially Korea. Korea is a huge destination right now, like post COVID. And since we've opened up our borders here, our tourism has been booming. I think K-pop has really put Korea on the map, and just more travelers coming here and sharing their pictures are getting more people to add it to their bucket list, and more people traveling here. And so I think a lot of people want to come here. So if you want to share your time in South Korea, share your time abroad in whatever country you're in, I think it's a great opportunity to connect with other people living abroad, to connect with people who maybe want to move abroad, or just connect with fellow travelers, because regardless, it's a great community that you'll be able to build. And I always say some of the friendships I've made through social media are some of my like closest friends that I know I will meet one day. We'll go traveling together. But even just in South Korea, some of my closest friends I've met in South Korea, I've met through Instagram or TikTok, and they're some of my closest friends here. So in the age of social media, with technology being advanced as it is, it really is amazing how we can use it to our advantage.
And you talked about the appeal of South Korea and how popular it's become as a destination. You talked about your top five cities earlier on, and you don't have to list them in exhaustive detail unless you want to. But it was interesting because you said Busan and Seoul just wouldn't feature, and no knock in them, but they wouldn't feature in your top five. So quickly, could you tell us, which kind of people, which kind of teachers are best suited to particular regions within Korea, just as a sort of kind of very, very brief beginner's guide. Like if you're X type of person, you should be based in this region, that kind of thing. Is it possible to do that?
Yeah, I mean, to start, Daegu is a really popular city here in Korea that people will live and teach in. But it's also the hottest city in Korea in summer. So if you don't like the heat, Daegu will not be for you. And same with if you love nature. Yes, Seoul has some really easy hikes from the city, but Busan is where I would say the nature is so accessible, that it's so easy to take a subway and then take a quick bus, and then you can be hiking a mountain to a gorgeous panoramic view. Or there's so many coastal walks in Busan. Some of my personal favorites are the coastal walks, and so Busan is definitely for if you love nature. Also, there's some amazing temples in Busan as well, some very unique temples that have some big festivals. So if you're also into like culture, religion, I would definitely say Busan. Nightlife, I know nightlife is something a lot of people think about when they come to Korea, but I think regardless of the city you are in, you will be able to find nightlife in Korea. I think everyone thinks about Seoul as being the big party city, which it is. But I think most larger cities in Korea will have the bars, the club scene, whatever you're looking for. And so, yeah, I think there's definitely options outside of Seoul and Busan for the nightlife scene. Speaking just to Jeonju, like we have some really great like bars and clubs here that I know a lot of foreigners will frequent. And so it's easy once you move here, you find a city or whatever city you're in, you can just look on Facebook. And Facebook groups is a great way to find other foreigners, to find things to do, the recommendations, all of that stuff. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm biased, but Jeonju, an amazing city to live in. We have our tourist spot, the Hanok Village. We're close to nature, and it's a good sized city, lots to do, but it's also really easy to travel. So if anyone wants to come to Korea, I highly recommend Jeonju.
So a lot of your social media, and it's something we've already touched on, but it's an important part of your identity as a teacher, I think. But a lot of your social media is about body positivity, about self acceptance, and those are excellent things to teach in and of themselves. But has there ever been a crossover in terms of how much do you get to explore these topics in the classroom, and how has your experience of being in South Korea changed things? Has it been insightful, in that respect?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it's like something that I've touched on often in the classroom, but I would definitely say there's small ways that I'm able to. That even simple things of like diet culture is so deeply rooted in Korea. And my students will sometimes make comments about how their parents are telling them that they need to go on a diet. And these are like 10-year-old kids. And so I'll just be like, no, like you should just eat nourishing food, eat what you want. Like you're growing, you're moving your body, you're in school so many hours that like, it's okay, like, you don't need to go on a diet. So just small ways like that I hope that I can make some sort of difference of their minds, like, difference in their mindset or how they think about food or their body, because they definitely will make comments that, sometimes, like, as a teacher, I can only say and do so much, um, but I think, yeah, the big thing is, like, the diet talk where, sometimes, like, especially with my, like, young students that I'll just kind of remind them that, "No, you're in a growing body, you run around and you play all day, you should be able to you can eat what you want, you don't have to earn food." And it's usually interesting because sometimes the students are like, "Well, this is what my parents told me," and I'm like, "Okay," and then I have to change topics. But sometimes I'll have the students who are like, "Oh, that's right, like, that's interesting," and then, like, I can see them thinking about it. So, I hope in that aspect, like, making those small changes of just the conversations they have about food here and also just, like, body image, talking about, kind of goes hand in hand with the diet of dieting, body image, your weight. It's a big topic of conversation in Korea because of the beauty standard here. And yeah, definitely. It's a hard line of being an educator, not crossing that line, but also when you hear certain things say, like, or hear things, see kind of how students are acting, trying to do just little things to maybe get them to think about why they are doing what they're doing, why they're saying what they are saying. And definitely like living here as a like not thin person, as I always say, it's been an experience, but like I said, like I've had a fairly positive experience. Yes, like I said, people do stare, but I always joke that I never know why Koreans stare because I give them a lot of reasons to. I am 6 foot tall. I am a foreigner. My legs are covered in tattoos, and I'm not thin. So there's a lot of reasons for people to be staring at me, and I don't really care why they are. They just do, and like I said, I don't notice it anymore. But I think it's a concern a lot of people have before they move here because they know. I think K-pop really put um, a lot in people's mind about the diet culture here, the like body image, how they talk about body image and weight here. So a lot of people have that concern before they move to Korea about how is it going to be if I'm not a size 2 or if I'm plus size. And like it's not easy because you can't just walk into everywhere and buy clothes. And it's not for everyone. And I think that's okay to recognize that it's not necessarily an easy experience, but it's also not hard. Like I said, I've had a fairly positive experience. I haven't had much said. I've had students like point at my stomach and say that I like food, and I'll always laugh and say, "Yep, I do. Like, I love Korean food." um, because the kids don't think anything of it, and I know my students don't mean it ill will. They don't have any malicious meaning behind it. They're just saying it. They're just pointing it out. But yeah, it's definitely, like I said, it's not for everyone, and I think that's okay because if you are someone who maybe struggles with like your body image and here, like just in general before you come to Korea, Korea might not be the best place for you. And I think that is sometimes a hard pill for people to swallow. And you can prove me wrong, and maybe people will come here and not have the best mindset and have an amazing experience. But just from what I've heard from my friends' experiences, my own experience, me being extremely comfortable in my body and my body size, um, I know no matter what people say, with how they look at me, they're pointing, whatever, like that does not affect me because I'm comfortable with who I am. But I can also understand people who are not that comfortable in their body, that maybe it'll really hurt them. And I know people who have lived here, who are plus size, who have left because of the experiences they've had here. And so I think there's a lot of factors that play into it. But for me personally, I had a positive experience like living and teaching here as a plus size person. And I do recommend it, but I think you also need to be realistic in what it's like to live here because of the intense um, body image and diet culture that Korea is very rooted in. So it's definitely not easy, but where is easy to live? So
Oh, yeah, and there's something that I really I don't know. It sort of made the hairs on my back of my neck stand up there when you're talking about like 9, 10 year olds who are worried about dieting and that kind of thing. And I know you obviously as a teacher you have limited scope, but I mean I guess like the right words phrased well at the right time can surely act as early intervention. You know, if we're talking about kind of disordered eating and that kind of thing. And in terms of kind of the international audience that you have on social media outside of South Korea for a second, what kind of reaction do you get to these kind of posts that you do on social media? Has anything surprised you? And hopefully, you know, in a good way. Has the reaction been positive? Have you made friends this way? Like, tell us about what that's been like.
yeah, I've had a really amazing experience sharing what I share on social media, and um, that I've met so many people through social media. I've had so many DMs, and honestly, I'm such an emotional person. I will tear up every time I get a DM when someone tells me that like I've convinced them to book their first trip and they're plus size and they've always been scared to do it, but they finally did it because they saw a post of mine. I will always tear up when I see that because it just makes my heart so happy. Um, and so I have built an amazing community and I've reached so many amazing people. And just the fact that I am from a small town, I just share what I want because it makes me happy that I'm able to inspire others. Um, it really blows my mind, and I don't think I'll ever get used to it. No matter how many comments, DMs I get, like I'm always just in awe of um, what people say and how I can inspire them because I always say I post what I wanted to see as a young girl of someone comfortable and confident in their body, doing what makes their happy, like doing what makes them happy, and um, and that's why I do what I do and why I share what I share and why I am so vocal about being plus size on social media because I'm sure I could share all my travels of and not even mention it, but it's a part of my experience because it is something that I go through every single day. And yeah, so I've definitely had a very positive experience. But on the flip side, I've also had some hate. I feel like that's inevitable with social media. But for me, like I always just let it roll off because it so many people are so unhappy with their lives that they have to attack a stranger on the internet. And I don't I don't give it any time of day because it doesn't affect me. It doesn't hurt me at all. And I know that I have reached so many people that so many people have been inspired by me and by what I share. And so the like few haters that'll come and go, I just brush it off because I just know they're unhappy. And if they're unhappy enough to comment on a stranger's social media post, then so be it. But yeah, I'm very lucky that I've had a fairly positive experience sharing on both like Instagram and TikTok, having an amazing community, and just being able to show that in a society, in a world that tells us to shrink our bodies, that we don't have to shrink our bodies and that we can get out and explore as we are, that places are waiting for us, experiences are waiting for us, and now is the time to go. You don't have to lose weight, you don't have to fit into that specific outfit you want to. There's nothing that you need to do to just book the trip and go. And that's all I can hope is that I can show people that people who look like me or anyone can just get out and explore because like I said, society, the world tells us that we are less than, that we need to lose weight, that we need to shrink ourselves, do all these things when that's far from the truth. So, really grateful to have the platform I do, really grateful for the community I have. Um, and yeah, I always say it, but it blows my mind that so many people want to follow me and follow my experience. But I just love it, and it's truly changed my life. So.
And just kind of finally, before we get to where people can find you and that sort of thing, we've seen more and more Americans, especially Americans like around your age and with your kind of experiences, who want to live and work overseas. You know, they're getting more and more TEFL certificates. They're finding out about different places they can live and work. It's an ever growing contingent of people. So, what advice would you give to specifically Americans who want to move and teach abroad? And I ask this because the main theme that's come up with every other American guest I've had pretty much is that you can't get good mac and cheese in Asia. Is a real problem, I guess. Like, is there anything else that you've kind of come up against? And like, what advice would you give?
I mean, that is so true. I have made my parents ship me boxes of mac and cheese here, so I will also say that you cannot get good mac and cheese here. Cheese in general, especially coming from the Midwest, where like Wisconsin's the dairy state and we have the best cheese in the United States. I miss good
Hmm.
cheese. But besides that, besides the cheese,
Yeah.
yeah, I would just say like it's an experience, and I think it's what you make of it. That coming and moving abroad, that if you don't jump in head first, ready for the experience, whatever's going to happen, um, that like maybe you won't get the most out of it. I think it really is what you put into it, and you just the best thing I did was not have many expectations and just I came into it knowing I don't have teaching experience. I'm going to hate this or I'm going to love it. And I signed a year contract. So if I hate it, then I move back to Wisconsin. If I love it, I stay. And that's what happened. I came, I loved it, I stayed, and now I'm at the end of my second year. And I definitely think that even if I would have came and didn't enjoy it when it was only here for a year, it still would have changed my life. Moving abroad, being away from friends and family, learning a new culture, having to connect with people, having a new career. It's a lot. It's an entire experience in itself. And then you add the places you can see, the things you can do, the possibilities of possibly like traveling outside of Korea. There really is so much, so many opportunities. And so whether you want to move abroad for 1 year, move abroad for 10 years, it's a great opportunity. It's a great experience, but it is what you make of it. If you go in open minded, ready for anything that comes your way, that you will most likely have a better experience than if you really plan things and expect something out of it. I'm a planner. It was really hard for me to not expect much or have a plan, but I know that was the best thing I could have done because I just came in open minded, and it's been an incredible experience. And I definitely recommend like teaching abroad. Teaching in Korea is definitely an experience. I can only speak for the like Hagwon route. Of course, there's going to be bad schools anywhere, but that's why it's important to ask a lot of questions in the interview process and talk to current teachers. There's so much that you can do to make yourself feel more comfortable. Join the Facebook groups, connect with people on social media, follow all the Korea pages so you can see the information. There's so many popular ones that you can find. There's so many ways now, especially with technology, to really connect before you even move here. Like I said, I connected with someone who lived in Jeonju a couple months before I moved here, and being able to ask her all my questions and just kind of I remember sending her so many DMs full of questions, and she was so kind to answer all of them. And so, like, do that. Like, I did that. People do that to me. I help them. I give them all my advice and tips. And I think that's the best thing you can do is try to connect with people before you come. And then once you come here, say yes. Say yes to anything. Say yes to the experiences. Um, it's how you're going to meet people. It's how I met some close friends. It's how you do more. It really is just incredible the things that can happen if you're open-minded and you say yes.
Brilliant. I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better answer than that. So finally, where can people find you if they want to know more about what you're up to?
So I am on Instagram and TikTok, with both being my handle, Ilsa's Endeavors. So my name, ILSASENDEAVORS. Forgot that for a minute. But yeah, you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, same handle.
Brilliant. Well, Ilsa, thank you so much for speaking to us today, and all the best with your work in South Korea.
Thank you.
You've been listening to I Taught English Abroad, a podcast series by the TEFL org. To keep up to date with every episode, subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your streaming platform of choice. And we love feedback, so feel free to leave us a review on any platform you like. For more information about the TEFL org, or about teaching English as a foreign language in general, head on over to TEFL.org. That's TEFL.org. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.